Hey everybody, Garcia here, and today I'm taking a look at the latest game in the Pandemic series of games. This is Pandemic Hot Zone Europe. Hot Zone Europe here, much like the original release in the line Hot Zone North America, is basically a smaller version of Pandemic. It has fewer locations on the board, only 3 diseases you are trying to eliminate, fewer characters, basically, it's a smaller, shorter game. That's the idea, okay? And I guess the concept here is a game that is simpler to teach and play and will take less time. I think going from that idea, it succeeds. The question really then becomes, who is this for? Well, we'll try to get to that. But first, let me give you a look at what the board looks like, how the game plays, and I'll see you on the other side. So the objective in Pandemic Hot Zone Europe is the same as in basically any other pandemic game. You need to find the cures before something catastrophic happens, like having too many outbreaks or having the deck of cards run out when you need to draw another card. Now in the Hot Zone games, the games of course are smaller, so there are fewer locations on the board. There's only 3 diseases that you need to find cures for. Each one only takes 4 cards. You also have a reduced hand size of 6 cards. And the rest is largely the same, okay? So we've got here a couple of characters. You begin with a couple of cards each. And then on your turn, you're going to go through the list of actions here. So the first one is you can take 4 actions as listed on the player aids. And there's one of these for everybody. You can drive or ferry, which means move. You can discard a card and take a direct flight, fly directly there. You can discard a card of where you are and take a charter flight, meaning leave from, say, Rome, by discarding the Rome card and go anywhere you want to. And then on the other side, we've got treat disease that lets you remove the cubes from the board. You can pass cards to each other, which is share knowledge with a few limitations. And then, of course, discover a cure. In this game, for you to discover a cure, you have to do that at Geneva. So you have to come back there and do it there, all right? So the 2 characters we've got here each have a special ability. There are 4 characters in total. So I'll be showing you these in just 1 second, all right? But the general flow is that. So for example, if we are going to have these characters and the quarantine specialist here is going to start for their 4 turns, perhaps they'll go here for 1 action, which is a drive or ferry. That's a drive. Go here for another action. That's 2. And then treat disease for 3. And then treat disease for 4. That's 4 actions. Once that's done, then we go to the second step, which is draw 2 player cards. We will draw these and add them to our hand of cards. And again, once you've done that, you have to make sure that you are to your hand limit of 6. And then once that's done, then we draw infection cards, which are these, equal to the infection rate that begins at 2 and might escalate to eventually 3 and eventually 4. So we draw 2 of these. There we have Berlin, and we're going to add 1 of these to it. And that's the idea. Just add 1 to each as it comes up, okay? And then it's the next player's go. And you continue doing this, trying to get the colors you need in order to make it back and discover one of the cures by discarding those 4 cards. If you manage to do that for all 3 before there are too many outbreaks, or you run out of a color and need more, or again the cards, then the players collectively win the game. Now the characters. We have the quarantine specialist here, who has an ability that would have actually prevented this cube right here, and the Berlin one, in fact, because it was Berlin, yeah, from showing up. Because the quarantine specialist says you never place cubes in the location where they are or adjacent locations. So in fact, by ending here in Warsaw and then you flipping these 2 cards, this one's prevented because it's next to them, and this one's prevented because it's next to them. Pretty good power, right? But of course, very situational. It depends where you are on the board. And you know what you're able to accomplish. It's sort of a passive power that hopefully comes into play if you're in a really advantageous spot on the board. So that's the quarantine specialist. We got the virologist here. And when you discover a cure with this character, you can replace one of the cards with 2 other cards. So if I want to find the red cure, I can do it with 3 red cards and 2 other cards. We've got the pilot, this one here, that can take an action to fly to any city within 2 connections. So they can travel a little more quickly, and they can take someone with them. So for example, for one action, they can go from Amsterdam to Berlin for one, and then if this character's in Berlin, for another action, they can go from there to Stockholm and take them with on the trip. All right, so that's the pilot. And lastly, we got the containment specialist here, and the containment specialist, when they travel into a city that has 2 cubes or more, they freely remove one, as long as they're of the same color. So if I go Glasgow into Dublin, we remove one of these. So that's 1 action, 2, 3, 4 actions, and they could take that one too. So these are all very powerful, very interesting abilities. Now, these small hot zone games always include some little variant. Okay, the first one, the North American one, had a small variant with these crisis cards that you would flip over from a player deck, and they would do something. 1 shot, and then you discard it. In this one, we've got a different thing. So as you go through these cards, you are going to be finding just the normal player cards. There are some that are epidemic cards that are going to increase this rate of infection and also shuffle up these cards, put them back on top, accelerate what's going on, okay? And then there's also going to be the new ones, this mutation idea, in which one comes up, it's going to mutate one of the 3 different colors in some sort of way, and you leave it around until that color is cured, and then you can get rid of that. You don't know which ones you're going to get because you shuffle up a pile and add some into the deck. So you're never sure which of the 3 diseases it's going to affect and how it's going to affect them. So let me show you a couple of these, okay? They're all suited to be the same idea for all 3 colors. So for example, this is called resistant to treatment, and you have it for yellow, for red, and for blue. And it says, if there are 3 blue cubes, in this case, 3 blue cubes on a city, you have to spend 2 actions in the same turn to treat disease there. And the same thing for red, same thing for yellow. Then we've got one that is asymptomatic carriers, and that's again for all 3. That says, in this case for yellow, when a yellow infection card is drawn, to place 1 cube on a city that has no yellow cubes, you place 2 right away instead of just 1. Pretty bad. And then lastly, we have highly contagious. Again, across the color spectrum, and this one says, for red, for example, during the draw infection cards step, which is when you flip new bad cards over, draw 1 additional card if the current player has 2 or more red city cards, or blue city cards, or yellow in that case, right? And so you shuffle them in here. When they come up, you place them aside, they activate, and they are in play until that color has been dealt with. Now, if you get lucky and you get a color that you've already dealt with, great, that's nothing. But oftentimes, that won't be the case, and you'll be dealing with something that can really be a major hindrance. You can choose to change the difficulty in the game based on how many of these you shuffle into the deck, okay? And you space them out just like you do with the epidemic cards right here. So there you go. That's the way the game flows. Very similar to the first Pandemic Hot Zone North America, if you are familiar with this one, with that one rather. So let's go ahead and go back up top. Let me tell you what I think of this one, kind of how I feel about the series, and just perhaps what it might be good for. So I already reviewed the original release here in the line back when it first came out, and my conclusion was basically good, well made, engaging, a nice amount of tension for how small it is, but sort of not sure who this is for, and it kind of pales in comparison, especially when it comes to replayability, to the larger original Pandemic, okay? I think a lot of that is going to hold true for this one as well. I feel kind of the same way about them, though the main takeaway here is if you do have both, then you can mix and match some things, okay? So let's break it down. We're going to start at the top. Theme and setting is good. I enjoy the this idea of taking a closer look at different places around the world. It's really, I mean, ultimately, it's basically an extremely artificial thing. It really is. It's a map with specific locations that they want to create between these things, and then the names of the places have been changed. It's really, I mean, this is basically the same thing, right? The characters are different, so the theme there is a little bit different. And I guess if you want to, I don't know, go do a deeper dive into what these places are like because you have some personal experience, then it might be different, you know, if you're from one of these locations. But the theme works, the sort of the wider overview of what it is you are accomplishing and faced with in these games, that's cool, it's interesting, and it works. The aesthetics are also good. It does have these tiny little cards, but they're high-quality cards. All of the tokens are plastic, and again, high quality. Everything looks good and functions well. The replay value, I think, is okay. They include one module in this one, just like they did in the original one, to mix it up, to allow you to just do new things and to give you more replayability because you can adjust the difficulty with that, okay? You do not have the ability in this game to change how many of these epidemic cards are in the deck. It's too small for that. You play with all three of them. There's only 3 of these, and they're always in. The one way you can change the difficulty is by adding in this version, the mutation cards. You can do 3 of these. You can do 6 of them, is what they say. That's the difficult mode, okay? The most difficult mode. So that's fine. It changes it up a little bit, but it's sort of one parameter you can modify, and that's really it. In the first one, like I said, it was crisis cards where they come up and they do something bad and then you discard it. In this one, they mutate some disease. Both are interesting, both ideas. I think they both add more replayability, but about the same replayability. However, if you own both, then you can do them at the same time if you want to, and that can kick up the replayability a little bit. The game arc, it's fine. It's good for how short the game is. I think it has a nice amount of tension. It is definitely a great introductory game to Pandemic. And to be honest, they've publicly said, or maybe the designer publicly said, that this was originally something that they put together in order to demo Pandemic at conventions. And then the publisher saw it and thought, we can publish this as a tiny little Pandemic Junior kind of version, right? And so they pursued this line of games. But it kind of feels that way. You can tell that this is sort of Pandemic in a hurry. You know, if you only have 30 minutes, but you must play Pandemic, then yes, you can play this. And that's fine. But the game arc is, of course, tightened up a little bit to fit those same emotions in a shorter time frame. The ease of play is very high, as it should be, right? This game and this system by now has been smoothed to perfection. There are so many iterations of this that it is very, very smooth. And again, if your idea is simply to play this with folks that wouldn't want to go anywhere near the original game because there's too much going on, maybe. Not that there is a lot going on, in my opinion, but they want something smaller, something simpler, something that's a little shorter, then yes, absolutely. The ease of play here is going to help you bring this to the table. Lastly, tactics, luck, strategy. They're fine. And it shows that even reducing everything, condensing everything to this point, just like they did in the original one, the system underneath, that Pandemic core, and some of the brilliant ideas there shine through. You know, those ideas of intensifying where things are going badly by taking the deck of cards here, the bad ones, shuffling these up, and then putting them on top of the deck again so that all these places continue to come out. It's a stroke of genius, right? So that all works well. For me, I think this is exactly for the same folks who liked the first one. And in fact, the games are extremely similar, really. Again, if you ignore the fact that they say different words where these dots are on the table, then the only differences between these two are you have different characters. There's 4 in each. And you have one different little sort of module in each. If you own both, you can mix characters, you can mix those modules, and if you go online, they have a mode that you can play, this Hemispheres mode, in which you can play with one person controlling one board and 3 characters against the other person controlling the other board and 3 characters. Cool, that's clever. I'm glad that they sort of came up with a thing to combine them both. But for my money, at that point, just play Pandemic. Or just play one of the other many Pandemic variants. Go play Pandemic Iberia, and you're going to have plenty to think about without having to figure out these 2 or 3 extra rules where you have to, put a card down in the archive, and then the other player can pick it up from the archive and sort of, come up with these ideas in order to combine two halves of the board. This is going to get from me the same score that the first one got, which is a 7 out of 10. That is still good. That's still a seal of approval because I do like it. I think it has its place. It's maybe not the place for people who adore Pandemic and sort of have all the quote-unquote big games, but I think it does serve a purpose. I will say, though, if you have one of the two, having both does make them both a little more replayable because you have more characters and you have more, sort of, again, events and little twists you can add in. I just feel like having more than one of these starts to encroach on Pandemic. And at that point, then why not just play Pandemic? This is like buying Pandemic slowly. The regular game. So I'm not sure. I also, the flip side of that is I feel like, well, you don't really need both. They're very similar. Just pick kind of the one that you think is going to get more table time. And of the 2 little modules, which one you think you might like more. And start there. Okay? So there you go. Again, it's a 7 out of 10. Neat. I definitely think a lot of folks that haven't tried the game and want just a sample of it, want to see what it's like, I think this is a good one to sort of, dip your toes into and see if you like this system, or maybe you're not sure about cooperative games. This is a good one to try out and see if you like the ideas there. So there you go, everybody. That's it for me. We are looking here at Hot Zone Europe for Pandemic. My name is Z Garcia. I'm going to see you on the next one.